everybody. Welcome. I'm Howie Howard from Mr. Furious Records. Today on Dat Fury Radio, Michael Carlson returns with a brand new album. What would you call a 4-hour suite, Michael? It's kind of more than an album.
Yeah, it's it's a lot, but intentionally. Yeah. So when I was asked to make this, the request was I want to put this on repeat and just zone out for hours. And so I took that as my cue to say, okay, that means it's got to be long enough that when it repeats, you don't feel bored because you just heard that thing. And having listened to it myself more times than I can count, I think I can say mission accomplished on that part.
Yeah, knowing you and knowing your editing and revision and creative process, it's kind of tough to imagine how many times you've listened to this and what an investment of time that is. The
Particularly,
album. Go ahead.
Doing it with a tracker, that mode of operation does not lend itself well to quick edits, especially if you're doing any kind of live effects processing and stuff. You kind of have to start it from the beginning and let it play through until you get to the part that you're waiting for, and then cross your fingers that you got it right.
Oh, I had not thought about that in a tracker context and how, unlike a DAW where you can skip to where you want to hear for the most part, with the tracker, oh my goodness, you do have to let it play through.
Yeah. But again, that's for me, that's part of the fun is listening to the music. And so that it wasn't that bothersome to me. And obviously, once I got through the major compositional pieces, there were some times where I would cheat. I would just kind of render it out so I could skip to that part and see how it went. But yeah, sure. it was years in the making. And then I just quickly did the math last night, and it was like 3 months to do just the mixing and mastering piece.
Sure.
Of course, there were many steps involved there because, hi, have you met me? It's not just stereo. Spoiler alert.
For sure. So. The album is called Coalescence. It's up for pre-order at bluesanct.bandcamp.com. Link in the description. The 4-hour experience is 8 pieces. We're going to listen to 3 roughly 15-minute excerpts from those pieces today. And in next week's show, we will play an unedited piece, plus have a special surprise at the end that I'll talk about when we get there. But that is the plan for today. I'm going to go ahead and get some music started. And we are going to start at the beginning with Bowie on Dat Fury Radio. Yes, dear listeners, do not be alarmed. There's nothing wrong with your podcatcher machine. This is Waves of Noise. This piece will evolve slowly, as is the way of remst8. But let me tell you, so Michael sent me these files for the first time to check out. Roughly, 5 or 6 months ago, probably.
Yep.
And I didn't know what to expect. I could see that it was a, kind of a massive work that felt important. And so I was very intentional about my first listen. I took the pieces roughly 2 at a time, depending on length. So it took me 4 or 5 listening sessions spaced out over weeks, 4 or 5 weeks, maybe longer to get through the whole record. But I wanted to give it that kind of attention, knowing how you create and what it meant that you were preparing to put out 4 hours of music. Would you like to talk any more about kind of the inspiration / commission / charge you were given by Mark Wan?
So at the end of the 2017 Electro Music Festival in Indianapolis, I closed the night's performances, so I was the last one to go. And when I got, of course, it's when I'm performing, for me the performance is appearing calm because I'm just totally freaking out inside. And so when everything was done and I did my final fade out, and everything was done, I was kind of surprised that someone was standing in front of me, and it was Michael Anderson, aka Dreka. And he said, "Hey, I want you to do a piece for my label." And I was like, "What?" Because I'd listened to his stuff for a while, and I was kind of a fan, so it was kind of shocking that he would be interested in my work. And so, as mentioned at the beginning of the pod, he said, "I want to just play it for hours and zone out." And so, granted, that was quite some time ago. Had some distractions, but it was like the beginning of our relationship. We had done some collaborations back and forth, and basically kind of became habit that whenever he came through Kansas City, I'd help him, with the show. He would likewise ask me to play, when we were in the same vicinity. And so over the time, we kind of got a good feel for each other. And so, yeah, ultimately it was just a matter of finding the time to make this behemoth. And thank you so much for not only listening to it, but also doing so with intention, because, it's 4 hours, and that's a huge commitment for anyone. And so, I always kind of feel, I kind of feel awkward asking people to listen to it because I don't want them to feel burdened. And so, yeah, it's a lot, but it serves that purpose. The intent is you can either use it to help you fall asleep, use it to help you focus on work, or just completely ignore it. Just music is what it is to everyone in their own way. And so, yeah. Don't know what else to say about it. It took me a while to put it all together, but I'm very happy with where I wound up.
Well, I'm right in your wheelhouse. I've made my share of 4-hour albums and unlistenable music, so I'm right in there for a project like this. But I don't want the way I'm talking about it to make it sound unapproachable. The movements are quite distinct, more distinct than I expected going into the experience, from how we had talked about it. And so you can, I think, as a listener, kind of chunk it out however you would like or however you would need. It does add up to something greater, I think, especially when you take multiple chunks at once. But it, in my opinion, and we can fight if you want, it doesn't have to be taken as a 4-hour piece. I found it very good to do 2 or 3 pieces at once, and now that I understand the flow of it and the greater thing that it does add up to, I actually feel even more free to play it all at once and feel oriented. I know the territory to some extent, and so I can, I can't really focus on it for 4 hours. My meditation practice is not there yet, but I can dip in and out and enjoy a full playthrough, or I understand the movements and can seek out a specific movement for a specific purpose if that kind of fits more what I'm doing.
Yeah, at one point I was debating whether or not I wanted to have a fixed sequence of tracks, or if I wanted to set each track up such that the beginning and the end worked in a way that you could shuffle them and it would still work. But I kind of wound up with finding a sequence that I felt like was an appropriate journey.
Yeah. The shuffle is an interesting idea, though. I like how it turned out, but that is an interesting idea. How did you find your way in to the request at the very beginning?
That was actually the hardest part, as it typically is with any project, is getting started. The request came like late 2017. And as I mentioned, had a few distractions, one of which was getting into surround sound. And so a lot of it, a couple of the years, was kind of experimenting in that space and kind of feeling my way around what would work and what would not work. Early on, my vision was this would be a fully quadraphonic album that I would encode using regular matrix encoding so that it could be delivered as stereo files that you could then decode into quad if you had the right equipment. But I found that the more complex the sound, the less accurate the decoding was. And if it was purely just the music, then that would be acceptable. But there are several pieces where I use field recordings, and there's enough information there that if it doesn't come out, things don't come out in the right space, it feels weird and wrong. And so that's again one of many distractions. And so a lot of it was just kind of trying to figure out A, the production direction, and then B, the composition as far as the kind of pieces that I wanted to make. And so to save it for second pod, but Unmore was like one of the very first pieces that I made. And the reason why it is so sparse and minimalistic is because that works best with that quadraphonic stuff. And an early vision of the whole thing was it's just going to be completely sparse, just very minimal. But I'm challenged to do something that's truly minimal. I really enjoy making stuff that's really layered so that each time you listen to it, you might discover something new. And so to me, that kind of, that value kind of won out, because, if you're going to chunk it up even for like an hour at a time, and if there's like a favorite track of yours that you just want to play that one or repeat, I still wanted to have something that might surprise you on the third or fourth listen. So, yeah. I don't know that I actually answered your question. So how did I approach this? It was basically trying a lot of things and kind of eventually whittling it down to, okay, these pieces seem to be working, those pieces don't seem to be working. And then it kind of got to the point where I was actually running out of time, so I just kind of had to execute. It's like, okay, I did the culling of the herd to find the ones that I thought would be a good enough fit, and then focused on those. Did I get anywhere close to an answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
you talk about layers goes right into kind of what I was thinking, though, which is that in a way, Coalescence, it feels like the layers from a more typical remst8 project, if there is such a thing, pulled out and kind of isolated and teased into their own thing. It's almost like you took a piece that would be one piece in a different project and made it into three pieces, isolating those different, whether it's the noise wash, the field recording, the drone, the kind of the orchestral. There's lots of kind of cello-ish drone sounds, I feel like, on this record. All of which would be an element in a different remst8 project, but kind of each have their 30 minutes to shine in this one.
Yeah, you're right on. Since Michael asked me to do this following a performance, my expectation was that was the kind of experience he was looking for. And I really don't consider myself a performing artist, even though I do perform on occasion. But that's typically how my life has come together, is I've got smaller pieces that are on their own would be something, but I try to weave them together in a way that it becomes a flow. And so that was basically what I wanted to do with Coalescence, is finding a way to help everything flow together. Even though there are 8 distinct pieces, as you've noted, some of them are actually a couple of pieces that have been kind of stitched together. One of which I think we're going to be listening to later on. And in particular, the end of this piece, it kind of grew a mutation at the end that was kind of influenced from another piece. And so it's just one of those things where I like the sound and I wanted to incorporate it somewhere else. And so made it happen.
And on the podcast, we may miss that because this excerpt is winding down. That's fine. This is the most prep and discussion about like the track list for the pod that I've ever done for a show.
You're
which
welcome.
Is kind of amazing and perfect.
I'm
but
sorry?
like picking which material to cover and for how long and everything.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's a lot. I get it. And
that's kind of the whole point.
Yeah, it is.
This is Gravitation, track 3, version 1.47G. The liner notes have a lot of fun exploration about the explanation, about the versions, and particularly for the pieces that have appeared in earlier forms elsewhere and are reappearing here, mutated and reconfigured. This is really evoking for me on my second and beyond listens of this material. Sometimes I've been rereading Charles Strauss's Merchant Princess series. It's 9 books. And I never read the 9th book, and I have struggled with my reading habit. I want to read more. My mom's death 2.5 years ago really threw my reading habit for a loop, and I have not found my way fully back. I've fits and starts and mostly rereading favorites. And so doing Merchant Princess again, which is one of my favorite series of all time, was a kind of bridge because I had not, again, read the final book. So I had a new one to look forward to at the end. And I remember specifically Gravitation is just bringing back for me like the book I was reading.
Oh, right on.
3 or 4 months ago. I've gotten stuck now again in the middle of the final one due to I basically haven't read since I moved house 3 months ago.
It's a big change.
Many big changes, but that's one of them. Do you want to talk about these sound sources at all, or is that kind of part of the mystery?
Sure. So this piece is actually 2 different tracks kind of melded together. The first movement here is kind of a slight update to a piece that I had incorporated into my live sets previously, and it's using material. The sound sources are by another artist, CXPA. He and I have done some collaborations where we would, do a split release, and then he would send me some source material, and I would send him some source material, and we would remix each other's work. And then the second movement of this particular one is kind of a remst8 remixes remst8, where I took just the cello portions of a collaboration track I did with Drekka, and I would play them at half speed, and then I would also play them at full speed but in reverse, and mixed all that together. So to be less kind about it, it's a part spin song.
I would not have guessed listening. It sounds fresh to me.
Yeah, it's funny how, as an artist, I know too much about how the sausage is made. So I have my particular perceptions and opinions of pieces, whereas you as a listener can come at it fresh and you don't have any preconceived notions about that. And so to your earlier question about do I want to talk about the things or leave it as a mystery, I try not to give away too much, because some artists, they like to have like a full statement about the work to give you some context for where they were coming from and why they made it and what the underlying context is. Whereas I am like, I try to give as little as possible. That's one of the reasons why every title is only a single word, because I'm trying to hone it down to the finest point of just giving you the least amount of some context to work with. Because in my experience, it's always way more fascinating to me to hear the perception from the listener of what they think the song is about and what kind of images it invokes for them. And so I maybe I'm just selfish, but I want to hear what the listener hears, because again, I know too much about how it was made. And so I've got a completely different perception of it.
Yeah, I think there's a real balance there. On the one hand, as listeners, a lot of times we want that info, find it super interesting. I mean, it's kind of what this show is about. On the other hand, I do agree with you that some amount of mystery is also part of the allure. I mean, there's something... There's a very deep psychological thing there in terms of like attraction and repulsion.
Yeah. That said, I have absolutely no problem sharing intimate details about what I used to make it, how I made it, because I feel like trying to hide that kind of information is kind of gatekeepery, and I just don't work that way. I'm more than happy to share, because I just want to learn too. So I truly enjoy having those kinds of conversations.
Yeah, I fully agree with that and feel the same. And you know, if there's one thing I've learned, it's that even if you teach someone the exact trick or whatever, they'll do something different with it. Like,
absolutely.
As artists, I think we can be very confident that however we do something, it changes in somebody else's hands. Yep. And we don't really need to worry about protecting technique.
It's not a contest.
Mm-mm.
I'm just here to make art.
And we've all gained so much by learning from each other. Like,
absolutely.
That's part of what makes the whole scene possible.
Yep. And I've learned so much over the course of making this beast.
Do you want to tell us about something?
About what I learned?
Yeah, something you learned, something that jumps out.
Yeah, so like I said, I learned a whole lot about doing immersive audio and surround sound. Like I said, when I first started down this path, I was thinking quadraphonic with a hop and a skip to 5.1. But then Dolby Atmos came along and I went down that rabbit hole and all the other rabbit holes around it. And that's kind of where I wound up. So it's the interesting thing to me is I think you can listen to it in stereo, and that's its own mix. And hopefully I did an okay job mixing it. Or you can listen to it in a full 714 system with the Atmos MP4s. And that's yet another experience. And then likewise for the videos on YouTube, they're in 5.1. So if you're using the YouTube app on a smart TV and you're hooked up to your surround sound system, you can get that experience too. So it's kind of funny where I've targeted two completely different listening experiences between the headphone mix that's completely intimate and just in your head versus the immersive audio where you can play it in speakers and have it all around you. But ultimately I'm just a nerd, so.
And we've talked about this, but for the listeners and for Royce in particular, who I know would want to ask, tell us, did you prepare completely separate mixes, or did you fold down the surround to stereo somehow, or how did you approach that?
Yeah, great question. So I composed everything in quadraphonic in Renoise. So at least during the compositional phase, I wanted to have the core spatialization figured out. And then from there, I would render everything out as stems to mix, and I would mix in stereo, and then I'd find all of the problems that are neatly hidden when you spread all the sound around it in 4 speakers. There's so much more room to work with versus trying to cram it all into just 2. And so then I would find all of the stacked frequency and all the masking that, sometimes I like to do masking as an artistic choice, but sometimes mixing remst8 has some very unkind opinions about composition remst8, because I like to do some things that are very challenging to mix. And I'm not a pro mixer by any means, but I also, it's, again, 4 hours is a lot, and I didn't feel like burdening Michael with that, so I kind of had to do that myself. So then once I found all the problems and fixed as many as I could in stereo, I would then take that information, mix all that in Dolby Atmos, and then I would create there's the stereo mix, completely separate Dolby Atmos mix, and then once I had learned some things about the spatialization there, then I would go back and do a separate 5.1 mix, which was intended to be as close as possible to the original quadraphonic. But, going through that round robin mixing exercise, I would kind of learn some things and make some new choices. So again, to make a long story short, they're completely separate mixes, because I'm not a professional mixer, and a pro would have done all that in the same session. but also B, I'm kind of a nerd and I wanted to explore each one in its own way. And then C, I just feel like the end results are unique for each output. And I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to fault you for putting in the extra work, you know?
Yeah. And I guess to answer your question about, there were a few times where I was tempted to just take the Dolby Atmos and then do a fold down and deliver that. But the way it folds down, I didn't like how some of, in particular, the field recordings, again, how they would come out. The way the information from the height speakers would get folded down to the surround speakers, it kind of made some things sound unnatural. And so I've got a newer project that I'm not supposed to talk about yet, that where I took the learnings from this one, and I chose a hybrid approach where I took the fold down of just the musical pieces, but then I would separately mix in from an ambisonic source the field recording. So that way I kind of got the best of both worlds. So I learned how to optimize it that way.
Yeah.
But for this one, all of my field recordings were taken ambisonics, so that way I could use the same source material for all of the mixes, but fold down for each specific format. So the stereo version of the track has the stereo fold down of the field recording, whereas the 5.1 has the 5.1 fold down of the ambisonic field recording, whereas the Dolby Atmos has a 7.1.4 fold down from the ambisonic recording. So again, I'm just a nerd.
But that's awesome. Even in stereo, it's a very immersive and rich listening experience. There's a lot of detail to listen to, so which is important given the structure of what you're doing. You want all that detail.
So spoiler alert, I did a thing that you're not supposed to do, and there are a couple of things in the stereo mixes that are actually binaural to help with that immersive sound.
Why wouldn't you be supposed to do that? I'm not aware of any problem with that.
So you're not supposed to do that because binaural things sound weird when you play them on loudspeakers. And so I kind of took advantage of the assumption that most people will probably be listening to this on headphones.
On headphones where it would work, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Sound caption, ominous drone intensifies.
Yeah, this one is quite a journey. It gets like pretty heavy.
Hence the title.
Yeah. And it's so appropriate not to spoiler alert for Charlie Strauss's 20-year-old Merchant Princess series. And I'm not going to do any plot, but they stumble into a world with this like this super high-tech concrete dome that's like half a mile across. That's actually a sphere that's mostly buried, so you only see like the top of it.
Cool.
But it's cracked, and obviously made nobody alive. Obviously made by a super high-tech civilization far beyond what we have here. The main timeline is roughly equivalent to our world in like 2005 when he was writing. But in the center of this dome is a doorway, and the doorway leads to hard vacuum.
Ooh.
And you know, in the court, they didn't know that, of course. So when they open the doorway, it causes a problem. But yeah, a piece named Gravitation was very relevant to the story at that point.
Right on.
All right, one more excerpt this week. This is Modulator, the 5th track off Coalescence by remst8. Available for pre-order at bluesanct.bandcamp.com. Link in the description. Let's let it play for a minute. So if you like what you're hearing, there are some different ways to get your hands on this besides just the digital files. Michael, why don't you tell and show our YouTube viewers what they can order on the website?
Yeah, so you can get stereo through digital download on Bandcamp, or you can order these USB flash drive cassettes. Let me pull this out. So Michael Anderson did a fantastic job making these. He didn't assemble the cassette, but he made the label for it, so it looks like a real thing. And it's got this little thumb drive that sticks out. And then he also did an amazing job with the J card. So you can see there's the artwork, but it's not just that one. There are actually 8 to choose from. And so you can select your artwork for your cassette. And if you buy the cassette, you get the digital files for those images. So you can also assign per track the artwork you want. The USB cassette includes the stereo continuous mix in MP3 and FLAC. And it includes the Dolby Atmos MP4s. The MP4 files, you can, if you do Apple Music app, you can just load it directly onto your phone that way, and that allows you to listen to binaural in your AirPods, or you can AirPlay it to your home theater to get the full surround speaker experience. And then I also have some music videos on that cassette that are in 5.1 surround sound. So Bandcamp is great for stereo, but not so, you can't really do multi-channel formats with it, and so that's why we're doing the USB cassette. And I'm just thrilled with it.
Yeah, you should be. And I also see a bundle
yes.
On the website.
Yes, so on May 22nd, Blue Sanct is releasing both Coalescence as well as an album by Votive Songs, both on cassette. And so there's a limited bundle where you can get those 2 cassettes plus 1 cassette from Michael's personal collection. And so 5+ hours of music for, is it $20?
$20.
That's a steal.
They may be, so as we record on May 8th, there is 3 remaining. They may be gone by the time this releases. The album is out, by the way, on Friday.
Yeah.
So we're in pre-order land as we record and as you listen. I picked these 3 pieces just, I wanted to try and give a sampler of the diversity on the project. It was hard to pick. You know, when I talked about my first listen, I didn't talk about the anticipation I had for the end, and to see how you'd end it. And listeners, you will have to stream or buy the record to experience that for yourself. We will not give away the ending on next week's show. But I will say, without spoiling it, that I was very happy with the ending, and you landed the plane.
Thank you.
After this very long journey.
So, the way that last track begins, I was really tempted to make that the first track. But again, with the sequencing of the tracks, then if I made that the first track, then what was the first track had to be the second track. And then, you know, the second to last track would have to be the last track. And I didn't feel like that was going to be as satisfying. And so I...
No, you did it right.
Right on, thank you. That's one of the many hard parts of assembling an album, is figuring out what sequence makes the most sense and is the most satisfying. So this track is the longest one of the whole album. And this one required a spreadsheet for me to kind of map out because it was so long. It was also an extreme challenge to mix because broad spectrum frequencies are not awesome in multi-channel speaker setups because you get lots of phase interaction. And so a few minutes ago, we heard some angelic choral voice sounds that are courtesy of Megan Mitchell, aka Cruel Diagonals. Many years ago, while I was in a creative rut, I commissioned her to record some vocals for me because I had no idea if I would ever use them or how I would use them. But she was kind enough to do that for a small fee. I took those samples, made some renoise instruments out of them, and at some point while struggling with this particular track, I kind of remembered that I had those, and so I kind of pulled up my spreadsheet and say, okay, it makes sense to try something here, here, and here. And when I did it just brought the whole thing together. So happy accident. Hopefully it's as satisfying for you and the other listeners as it is for me.
Yeah. Well, that happens, I think, sometimes, or it happens for me when I sit with stuff for a while, and then, you know, hopefully eventually the idea I need, or the idea the piece needs, will come up. I've been going through that actually kind of a lot the past couple weeks about all I've been able to get myself to do musically is pick away at Dar McBeam's dub mixes in 20-minute chunks or whatever. And these are the way that Daniel and I have figured out this next Dar McBeam's. You know, I'm generating all the raw material and the starting points, and then handing off to him something that's half finished to take wherever he wants to go, and that leaves me with like a half-finished piece that I have my own ideas as far as what would like a finished version of it be. So I'm arranging, maybe adding something, maybe pulling in something from his version, pulling it back in, so there's this kind of conversation between. But anyway, yeah, they had kind of. I started back at the beginning, so I'm revisiting half-finished ideas from like September.
Oh, right on, yeah.
And realizing like, oh, I can cut 2 minutes off of this, and like this, it has a bass line, but it needs something in conversation with that bass line, and maybe I think about it for a day, and like an idea comes as far as like what that thing would be. And that time is really important to me as a musician who does music as an avocation. I've kind of built my whole workflow around having lots of time to think about stuff and set stuff aside and revisit it 6 months later, and turning that limitation into a strength.
Yep. I think it's a critical piece of the creative process to spend time away from the thing that you're working on. It gives your subconscious a chance to mull things over and come up with some new ideas to try out.
I find it to be very important, and I cannot imagine what my creativity would be without it.
Yeah.
And I can't help but feel like it would be worse, like less productive, less imaginative. I really count on that time.
Yep.
And being able to set stuff down for extended periods.
Yeah. It was, while I was working on the mixing and mastering portion of this project, when I had enough of the material together that I could do a full listen through, it kind of became my habit that, I would just play it, in the background during my work day. And then, when something would catch my ear that either was wrong or I had a new idea to try out, I just kind of write down the track and the time and the note. And then that night after dinner, I would go in and make the change, bounce it out. But of course, there wasn't enough time to do like a full listen through. So just bounce it out, and then the next day, listen again and kind of iterate. So.
Yeah, that is very familiar to me. I mean, going back to spreadsheets, I don't know if I've ever had to have a spreadsheet for a song. I certainly use markers and Reaper to like chop up and make notes where I need to do things. And I certainly have spreadsheets for almost every album I do. And I certainly go through that same process of listening and making notes in spreadsheets or sending texts or emails to myself of this needs to go up 3 dB and this, at 4 minutes, the stereo field needs to be narrower and all those kinds of like really nitty gritty things.
For me, it's part of the fun.
Definitely.
Because I'm a nerd.
Breaking news on Dat Fury Radio. Couple of nerds.
Challenge question. Would you call this an ambient track or a noise track?
Speed drone.
Speed drone?
That's what you called my dad's music.
Yes.
I would call this ambient. It's pretty harmonious, some Western intervals. Relatively mild on the distortion, when I think noise, I think pretty distorted usually. So I would call this ambient.
Okay.
What do you call it?
Ambient noise.
Sure.
Or noise ambient.
My genre, my custom genre in iTunes for all this stuff is ambient / noise / cosmiche.
Okay.
So I dump all of that and even Klaus Schulze type stuff and like classic Tangerine Dream, and that would all go in kind of the same. I like my genres to be pretty broad, so that kind of all goes into a bucket for me.
Yeah, I struggle to figure out genres. I mean, there are so many subgenres, but a few years ago, I read a great article that discussed how noise and ambient are basically 2 points on the same line.
Can be.
Yeah.
I think I like genre as long as we don't take it too seriously.
Agreed.
Right? It can be fun and interesting to compare notes and think about, well, is this this? Is this that? Is it a cape band? Is it a robe band? But it is all... it's just for fun and to, like, provoke thought.
Yep.
And sometimes for function. Like, when I work out, I kind of like it all to sort of hang together. So it'll be a hip-hop playlist or an alternative playlist or whatever. But it stops being fun if we reduce somebody's creativity to the genre, I feel like.
Agreed.
Yeah, not surprised we're on the same page there. You listeners have been enjoying excerpts from Coalescence by remst8, up for pre-order right now at bluesanct.bandcamp.com, link in the description. Album comes out Friday. Michael will be back next week for a full piece and a special surprise. But until then, check out the track that's streaming now, Halcyon. And we will catch you next week on Dat Fury Radio.